My name is Elliot Graves. I am 77, a retired postal inspector who spent 4 decades sorting mail and tracking mail fraud across Delaware. Today, I live alone in the 2-story bayfront home on Henlopen Acres that I bought with my late wife Clara in the 1980s. Every morning begins with stiff knees, oatmeal simmering on the stove, and the local news whispering in the background. Clara has been gone for 5 years, but her laughter still echoes in the yellow kitchen she loved. Some days, the loneliness is so heavy that it settles in my chest like a damp fog rolling down from the bay. That morning, as I stirred my oatmeal, the dull gray dawn pressed against the kitchen windows. Steam rose from the pot in twisting ribbons, filling the room with quiet warmth. I was about to sit down at the little oak table Clara and I once crowded with pancakes and maple syrup when I heard tires crunching on gravel outside. I frowned. No one ever visited this early. Peering through the blinds, my breath caught in my throat. There it was, a sleek silver SUV pulling up the drive like it owned the place. My son, Nathan Graves. Even before he stepped out, I felt a tremor in my gut. Nathan never arrived unannounced. The car doors opened in rapid succession. Out climbed Nathan in a crisp navy jacket, his blonde wife, Helen Graves, and their 2 children, tall, silent Jesse Graves, lugging suitcases with headphone cords dangling from his ears, and small, bright-eyed Sophie Graves clutching her phone like it held her entire life. Carolyn didn't even glance my way as she lifted expensive luggage from the trunk. Her perfume floated down the walkway before she did. Nathan finally looked up at me, standing there in my old robe and wool slippers, oatmeal spoon still in my hand. "Morning, Dad," he called out with a tight smile. "We thought we'd come visit for a while." I blinked, my mind churning. "Visit with 6 suitcases." Before I could speak, Jesse brushed past me, dragging 2 roller bags across the porch planks like thunder. "Hi, Grandpa," he mumbled, eyes fixed on his phone screen. Caroline breezed by, next designer heels clicking on the wood as she surveyed the house like a realtor assessing a listing. She paused to wrinkle her nose at the potted geraniums Clara planted by the steps. "Elliot," she said, coolly nodding without meeting my eyes. Sophie stopped for half a second, offered me a ghost of a smile, then ran to catch up with her mother. Nathan patted my shoulder as he passed. "We'll only be here a couple of weeks," he said, tone light but eyes avoiding mine. "Maybe a month." A month. The word echoed in my head, dull and heavy. "Don't worry," he added as if I'd asked, "we won't bother you." I wanted to speak to ask what was happening, why no one had called, but my voice caught in my chest, clogged with an ache I couldn't swallow down. I turned back to my oatmeal, now cooling and thickening in the pot. Outside, Carolyn's sharp voice carried in through the window, "Nathan, get those bags up. I want the master bedroom aired out before tonight." Master bedroom, Clara's room, our room. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. I gripped the edge of the sink to steady myself. Upstairs, there were framed photos still gathering dust. Clara's smile frozen forever in golden hour light. Her paperback novels stacked on the side table, the rose quilt she sewed when Jesse was born. That room held every secret whisper of my life with her. And now Caroline was stripping the sheets before I could even finish my breakfast. For a moment, rage sparked under my ribs, but as quickly as it came, it faded, swallowed by exhaustion. I turned off the stove, poured the oatmeal into a bowl, and sat down alone at the table where Clara once read the newspaper to me aloud. Outside, the voices of my family rose and fell in excitement, claiming every inch of my house with their plans. I chewed each spoonful slowly, tasting ashes instead of oats, feeling like a ghost haunting a home that had once been mine. Within days, everything that ever made this house feel like mine began to vanish, slipping away piece by piece as if I'd never lived here at all. Vanessa moved through each room like a hurricane in designer heels, her presence smelling of expensive perfume and ruthless ambition. She swept away anything that didn't fit her cold minimalist vision, leaving behind a space that felt foreign and hollow. She started with my kitchen. One morning, I shuffled in before dawn to brew my coffee, only to find her elbow deep in my refrigerator. Her manicured nails painted the pale pink of bleached seashells, gripped jars and cartons as she tossed them into a black trash bag without a second glance. "This cheese is expired," she said flatly, holding up a block of cheddar I had bought just 2 days ago. "And this sausage, full of nitrates. Honestly, Elliot, it's like you're trying to kill yourself eating this garbage." I wanted to tell her that I'd eaten that brand of sausage for over 40 years, that Clara used to fry it every Sunday morning with scrambled eggs and sweet onions, filling the house with the rich, peppery aroma of love and comfort, that the smell of it was the smell of home. But the words caught in my throat like barbed wire. I just stood there silent and invisible as she threw away my breakfast, my memories, as if they were nothing but rotten peelings in her pristine world. Then came the redecorating. My living room walls, once lined with sepia family portraits, and Clara's framed pressed flowers were stripped bare in a single afternoon. Vanessa replaced them with abstract canvases in pale beige and sterile taupe colors, so muted they looked like shadows on fog. The room felt airless, drained of warmth and history, as though the house itself was holding its breath. My armchair, the old brown leather chair where I read the newspaper every morning for decades, where Clara used to sit on the armrest and kiss the top of my head, was unceremoniously dragged into the garage. "It ruins the flow," Vanessa explained with a flick of her perfectly manicured hand, as though my chair was a stain on her spotless canvas. She didn't stop there. One rainy afternoon, the loneliness pressed heavy on my chest, and I went looking for my records, needing to hear Ella Fitzgerald's warm, rolling voice fill the empty spaces. But when I reached the shelf where my record player had always sat, it was gone. I searched through every room until I found the box of albums in the garage, shoved behind their suitcases and shoe racks, cardboard damp from sitting on the cold concrete floor. When I carried them back inside, Vanessa glanced up from her phone and arched a sculpted brow. "These are junk, Elliot," she sighed. "No one listens to records anymore. You should try Spotify. But records aren't about convenience. They're about the scratch of the needle finding music hidden in grooves. They're about Clara humming along softly in the kitchen, while I spun Miles Davis and Benny Goodman, filling quiet Sunday mornings with brass and saxophone and the steady heartbeat of jazz. Records are memories you can hold in your hands, heavy and real, unlike the thin, invisible songs floating from a phone." By the end of that week, my world felt smaller. The kitchen's cheerful yellow walls, the bright marigold Clara chose to chase away gray winter mornings, were declared hideous by Vanessa and scheduled to be repainted in cold bone gray. My photo albums, carefully kept in the hall closet, were tossed into a trash bag to make room for Carolyn's endless boxes of designer shoes. Photos of my parents smiling in their garden, of my childhood dog curled at my feet, of Clara in her wedding dress clutching daisies from her grandmother's garden, her smile so radiant it could light the darkest room. All of it discarded like worthless clutter. I retrieved them silently from the trash, brushing off coffee grounds and apple cores, feeling my throat tighten around grief and rage too old to speak. As I carried the albums back to my bedroom, Vanessa's voice floated down the hall, casual and sharp like a paper cut. "You're lucky we're here to clean up this place, Elliot. You'd be lost without us." But I wasn't lost before. I was alone? Yes. Alone with the quiet tick of the grandfather clock, with the creak of floorboards that remembered Clara's footsteps. Alone with her laughter echoing through my mind, her perfume lingering faintly in the linen closet. The silence was full back then, full of memories, of meaning, of a life built inch by inch with my own hands for love. Now the house buzzed with their voices, their complaints, their brittle laughter that never included me. And for the first time since Clara died, I felt like a trespasser in the only place I ever truly belonged. The home I built for a life that no longer existed, swept away like crumbs from Vanessa's immaculate marble countertops. And in that silent knowing, a quiet sorrow bloomed within me, heavy and certain I was still here. But my life had been erased. One night, unable to sleep, I stepped into the dark kitchen for water and found Vanessa whispering urgently on her phone by the window. She didn't hear me enter, and her words slid through the dim silence like poison. "Don't worry, Mom," she said, her voice tight with irritation. "He'll be out of here soon enough. Once we get the deed transferred, we can sell the place before summer. Yes, I've already spoken to the realtor. We'll split the profit, and you can finally move down here too." For a moment I stood frozen glass trembling in my hand. They weren't just redecorating my life, they were erasing it entirely, planning their future on the grave of mine. As she turned and noticed me, her smile flicked on like a switch. Oh, Elliot couldn't sleep. But in that moment, under the cold hum of the refrigerator light, I knew this was no family visit. This was a quiet eviction in progress. That afternoon, as I sat by the window polishing Clara's old brass lamp, the late sun slanted through the glass in golden streaks, illuminating every swirl and dent her hands once touched. I worked slowly, feeling the solid weight of it anchor me to this quiet moment, to this room that still held her laughter in its corners. I didn't hear Sophie's footsteps until she was nearly beside me. She approached with hesitant steps, her soft sneakers making no sound on the worn wooden floor. The light caught her hair, turning it to a pale halo around her worried face, and for an instant, I saw her as she was at 6 years old, racing across this same living room with hair ribbons streaming behind her. Not a college freshman with textbooks that smelled of ink and ambition, but a little girl with scraped knees and chocolate on her lips. "Grandpa," she whispered, her eyes flicking nervously down the hallway to check if her mother was listening. The single word fell heavy into the silence between us. I nodded, feeling a chill bloom in my chest, despite the sun warming my knuckles. She perched on the armrest of my chair, biting her bottom lip so hard I thought she might draw blood. For a moment she said nothing, just twisted the drawstring of her hoodie between her fingers, her shoulders shaking with silent breaths. Her eyes glistened with tears. She fought to keep contained. They're planning something," she said finally, her voice cracking under the weight of words too heavy for her young heart. "I heard Dad and Mom talking last night. They're moving Grandma Carol and Grandpa Greg here. They want this house for them." Her words slid down into my chest like ice water poured straight through my ribs. My son, Noah, bringing Vanessa's parents here into my Clara's kitchen, where she hummed as she chopped sweet onions for Sunday stews, where the window above the sink framed her profile each morning against pink sunrises, into her garden, where she planted daisies and lavender to keep the bees happy, into the living room, where her quilt, bright as spring itself, still draped across the old sofa. Our home piece by piece being stripped of us to make space for strangers. Sophie inhaled shakily, blinking fast as her tears threatened to spill. "They've already found somewhere else for you. Pine Grove. It's a nursing home, I think. Mom said it's clean and has staff to keep you from falling and breaking a hip." Her mouth twisted into a grimace as she repeated Vanessa's words. Her disgust mingled with grief. The words echoed in my ears like an insult shouted from far away, echoing down dark halls I never wanted to enter. I closed my eyes, feeling the chair tilt beneath me with nausea. Pine Grove. The name alone conjured a silent forest of forgotten people beds, lined up in echoing rooms, each stripped of dignity and memory, each day measured out in pills and pureed meals. I saw myself there in the dim, fluorescent-lit halls, a man who once built this house with his own hands, now confined to a recliner with wheels, his stories reduced to polite nods from tired nurses. And Noah, my son, The boy I taught to ride a bike running behind him down the cracked sidewalk as his wobbling wheels found balance. The boy whose knees I bandaged after soccer games, whose sobs I quieted the night his puppy died in his arms. That boy, now a man, booking a room for me at Pine Grove, as though I was an unwanted guest in his life. As though I was a piece of old furniture too scratched and sagging to polish. When I opened my eyes, Sophie was crying, silently tears streaming down her cheeks onto her knees. She shook with guilt and helpless rage. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I didn't want to tell you, but I couldn't let them just do it without you knowing." I reached up with trembling hands and cupped her face, feeling her hot tears soak into my palm. "You did the right thing, sweetheart," I whispered, though my throat burned with unshed tears. My voice cracked with a sorrow too vast to contain. "You did the right thing." That night, after the house fell silent and their muffled laughter drifted faintly down the hallway, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The clock ticked softly in the corner, counting down time I no longer owned. I stared at the faint stain on the table's edge, the brown crescent where Clara once spilled her coffee, and laughed about it for an hour. Her laughter had been a sound that filled the whole house, warm and unself-conscious like birdsong at dawn. My home. Her laughter. Our memories. And now Noah was taking it all away to make room for Vanessa's parents' people, whose names I barely knew, but who would soon sleep under this roof while I was locked away in Pine Grove. That night, a bitter clarity settled over me like frost creeping across glass. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or fists slammed onto tables. Sometimes it comes quietly on slippered feet. Sometimes it arrives with polite smiles and signed paperwork. And sometimes it comes from the hands you once held as they learn to walk, and it cuts deeper than any blade could ever reach. That evening, they gathered me in the living room, like a child about to be scolded. The room glowed with the dying light of sunset, Claire's lace curtains, the fragile patterns, worn perfect by grandchildren who scrolled. Noah sat hunched on the couch, elbows resting on his knees, fingers knitted together so tightly his knuckles blanched. His brow furrowed, as if he were bracing for impact from a truth he couldn't bear to speak aloud. Vanessa stood beside him with her arms folded across her chest, her chin lifted in self-righteous conviction, like a queen pronouncing judgment upon a disobedient subject. Sophie lingered near the staircase, her tear-swollen eyes darting between me and her parents, while Tyler sat sprawled in an armchair, scrolling mindlessly on his phone, thumbs flicking across the screen, pretending none of this concerned him. "Dad," Noah began, his voice, calm but trembling beneath the practiced restraint. "We need to talk about your future. My future. As if I had decades left to map out to spend charting possibilities in the blank spaces of time." I said nothing, staring instead at the darkening window behind them, where the evening sky bled into bruised shades of orange and purple over the quiet bay. Noah cleared his throat, glancing nervously at Vanessa before continuing. "We've been thinking it's not safe for you to stay here alone anymore. You forget your pills. The stairs are dangerous. The house is too big for you to maintain." "I'm not alone," I interrupted quietly, gesturing around the room filled with their shadows. "I have you. I have Sophie. Tyler. This is my home." Vanessa rolled her eyes with a small, tight laugh. "This is no place for you anymore, Henry. You deserve professional care. Somewhere clean and comfortable, where your meals are prepared, your laundry done, and nurses are on call if you fall again." Her words were polite but brutal, each syllable landing like a silent slap. She opened her leather folder with graceful precision and pulled out a glossy brochure. Pine Grove. The name alone curdled my stomach. The paper smelled of fresh ink and chemicals like a death sentence sealed in laminate. On its cover, a smiling elderly couple sat on a bench beneath cherry blossoms, their hands clasped, their eyes vacant with the blank politeness of staged happiness. I pushed it away with shaking fingers. I'm not going there. Noah let out a sigh that sounded like surrender. Dad, don't make this harder than it is. We've already put down a deposit. They're holding a room for you. You'll have your own bathroom and TV. You can bring photos. Sophie can visit on weekends. I turned my gaze to Sophie, standing small and pale near the stairs. Her tears fell silently, leaving dark marks on the oak railing. Her shoulders shook with the effort of holding herself together. Please, Grandpa, she whispered, voice cracking. I tried to stop them. Vanessa snapped her folder shut with a sharp click. This isn't up for debate. If you refuse, we'll pursue guardianship. The lawyer said a couple of doctor assessments will be enough given your age and medical history. Guardianship. The word tasted like metal on my tongue. They would strip me of everything my right to sign my name, to choose my meals, to lock my own front door at night. They would reduce me to a dependent number on billing statements, a task to be scheduled between yoga classes and school pickups. That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, its plaster rippling softly in the dim light from my bedside lamp. I saw Clara's face there, tender and defiant, her eyes fierce with love as she brushed paint across these walls decades ago. I heard her voice echo through my chest, faint but unbreakable. Don't ever let them decide for you, Henry. Never. My chest ached with grief, longing, and a hot, suffocating rage I could not release. Sleep never came. Morning arrived with the cruel inevitability of a tide. They loaded my 2 suitcases into Noah's SUV with brisk efficiency, packing away the fragments of my life like trash after a yard sale. I turned once to look back at the house, at Clara's kitchen window, glowing with dawn, at the porch we built with our own hands, laughing, as sweat dripped down our backs, at the ivy curling stubbornly over bricks we laid together in youth and hope. Noah closed the door behind me with finality. The latch clicked softly, but I felt it slam in my chest like the lid of a coffin closing forever. As the car pulled away down the driveway, gravel crunching under tires, I watched my home grow smaller in the rearview mirror, shrinking into memory until it was nothing but a blur against the horizon. And I realized then, with a clarity sharp enough to draw blood, this was how it felt to be buried alive, to watch your life disappear behind you while your heart still beat in your chest, while your lungs still pulled in air, while every cell in your body screamed that you were still here, but no longer seen. Pine Grove smelled of antiseptic and stale gravy, a heavy cloying mix that clung to my clothes, my hair, my skin, no matter how many times I scrubbed under the scalding spray of the narrow shower stall. Days blurred into each other under flickering fluorescent lights, merging into a gray, soupy fog of routine oatmeal at 6 pills, at 7 seated exercises, at 9 tasteless lunches on beige trays, at noon, and the hush of exhausted souls sitting silently by curtained windows, waiting for visitors who never came. On the 4th day, as I pushed away another plate of congealed mashed potatoes, a raspy voice drifted from behind me, cutting through the fog. Henry Callahan. That can't be you. I turned startled and nearly choked on surprise. Standing there leaning heavily on a carved oak cane was Ferris Dunham. Gaunt and stooped with age, his thin shoulders curved like worn driftwood, but unmistakable behind thick black glasses. Ferris had been my partner back in the postal inspection days, chasing down fraudsters and forgers across 3 states. He had always been taller than me, with a grin that sliced through tension like a blade and a mind sharp enough to scare even the boldest counterfeiters into confession. Ferris. My voice cracked with sudden joy. I stood too quickly, my knees protesting. I grabbed his forearm, feeling his brittle bone beneath thin skin. Jesus, what are you doing here? He wheezed a laugh that rattled in his chest, tapping his cane on the tile floor. Stroke number 2 finally convinced my daughter I needed professional care, he said, mimicking air quotes with trembling fingers. Been here 8 months now. And you, I thought you'd be living out your days in that bayfront palace of yours, king of the marshland. I sank back into the hard plastic chair, shame burning through my chest. They threw me out, Noah and Vanessa, said I was a danger to myself. Ferris snorted so loudly the nurse at the end of the hall glanced up. Danger to yourself. You once tackled an entire counterfeit ring with a dislocated shoulder and a busted knee. His words stung with truth, igniting something dormant in my chest. We spent the afternoon hunched over the scratched laminate table in the common room, swapping old stories. Ferris recounted his infamous sting operation in Harrisburg. I reminded him of the time he forged a fake wedding invitation to infiltrate a mail fraud ring in Wilmington. For a few hours, the air smelled not of antiseptic, but of coffee and cheap cologne of damp winter jackets in the field office of days when we mattered. But as dusk settled and aides wheeled residents away for dinner, Ferris leaned in close, lowering his voice until it was little more than a hoarse whisper. Tell me this, Henry. The house, is it still in your name? I frowned, puzzled. Yeah, Noah never bothered with paperwork. I still pay the taxes out of my pension. He whistled softly through his teeth, shaking his head. Then why the hell are you sitting here waiting to die? Sell it. Teach them a lesson. Take back what's yours. Sell it. My mind churned like rusted gears forced awake after years of stillness. To who they're living there. That's why you sell it out from under them. His eyes gleamed behind his thick lenses. My nephew Horace runs a real estate agency in Lewis, knows every loophole in Delaware property law. Let me call him. That night, lying in my narrow bed, the plasticky mattress crinkling with every breath, I stared up at the flickering ceiling tiles, the hum of fluorescent lights vibrating against my skull. For the first time in weeks, I felt something rise inside me. Anger? Yes. A white-hot fury at Noah, at Vanessa, at the world that had stripped me of my dignity. But beneath it, deeper and more powerful, pulsed a fierce flicker of hope, an ember refusing to die out in the cold. The next afternoon, Ferris wheeled over to me in the recreation room, grinning through his oxygen tubing as he held out a cell phone. It's Horace. He wants to talk to you. Mr. Callahan. Horace's voice was brisk, confident, the voice of a man who closed deals before breakfast and forgot them by lunch. Your uncle told me everything. If the deed is in your name, you can sell it. No one can stop you unless you're declared legally incompetent. And you, sir, sound sharper than half my clients. But they're living there, which Horace chuckled softly makes it poetic justice. I'll handle inspections discreetly. You'll be scheduled for field trips with other residents. But instead of museums, we'll tour your house with buyers. All you have to do is say yes. That night after dinner, trays were cleared and the halls fell silent, except for the soft beeping of monitors in distant rooms. I pulled Clara's wedding photo from my nightstand drawer. I held it under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, tracing her face with trembling fingers. Her eyes twinkled in black and white lips, curved in that quiet smile that had made my knees go weak 60 years ago. The smile that built this entire life with me. I think it's time I fight back, darling, I whispered to her, my voice breaking. For us, for everything they tried to erase. And for the first time since Noah's SUV drove me away from my own porch, I slept soundly. I dreamed not of endings or slow decline, but of beginnings yet to come, of fierce rebirth, of final justice, and of a man who refused to be buried before he was dead. Horace kept his word. Over the next week, he arranged 2 inspections under the guise of therapeutic outings. The nurses believed he was taking me to art exhibits or aquarium tours like the other residents, but instead, we drove familiar roads lined with oak trees bending under late summer heat toward the house that still haunted my dreams each night. On the first visit, a couple from New York pulled up in a sleek black SUV, their license plate bracket emblazoned with a Fifth Avenue Realtors logo. The woman stepped out first, her blonde hair scraped into a high ponytail so tight it pulled her brows into permanent disdain. Her husband followed, adjusting his mirrored sunglasses as he surveyed my yard with a grimace. Inside, she clicked through rooms in towering nude stilettos, her acrylic nails tapping disdainfully against Clara's kitchen counters. "It's also dated," she scoffed, her lips curling. "We'd gut this completely. This yellow hideous." Her husband merely nodded, flipping light switches on and off as if testing for ghosts. Their words cut deeper than I expected. This wasn't just drywall and tile. This was where Clara sang softly while peeling apples for Thanksgiving pies, where we danced barefoot on the scuffed linoleum to Benny Goodman on our 25th anniversary, giggling like teenagers while the stew burned on the stove, where I kissed her cheek each morning for 45 years before work, her skin warm and drowsy with sleep, watching strangers plan to erase all that felt like hearing them read her left. No, I thought you might say that. I have another buyer lined up. Different type entirely. 2 days later, Horace whisked me away again under the same outing ruse. My hands trembled against my thighs as we approached the house. I braced for another polished shark, eager to tear down what little remained of my life's meaning. But when we pulled into the gravel driveway, only a single car was parked there, a dark green Subaru with faded camping and national park stickers blanketing its rear bumper. Standing beside it was a man in his mid-50s, tall and broad-shouldered with sun-browned skin and silver-streaked hair swept back from his forehead. He wore no suit, only dark slacks, and a crisp blue Oxford shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms lined with pale scars. His eyes crinkled warmly when they landed on me. "Mr. Callahan," he said, extending a calloused hand. "I'm Thornton Barrington. It's an honor to meet you." His grip was firm and grounding, like grasping the trunk of a solid oak. As we walked through each room, he didn't critique the scuffed floors or outdated fixtures. Instead, he ran his fingers gently along the wooden banister Clara varnished by hand 40 years ago. "Solid oak," he murmured almost to himself. "They don't build them like this anymore." In Clara's yellow kitchen, he paused, gazing out the window to the bay beyond, where late afternoon light rippled across calm waters. "When I was a boy," he said softly, his voice turning inward, "my grandfather had a cottage by a lake in Minnesota. Every morning I'd wake to see him sitting on the porch with coffee staring at the water in silence. I always promised myself if I ever had the chance, I'd find a home like that. Quiet. Honest." My throat tightened so painfully, I pressed my knuckles against my lips to keep from crying. And the guest house clause, I asked, finally bracing for rejection, shame pooling hot in my chest. He turned to me, surprised, his eyes softening with an emotion I hadn't seen in anyone's gaze in years. "You mean you staying here?" A smile spread across his weathered face, slow and genuine. "Mr. Callahan, I wouldn't buy this house without you here. It's your spirit that makes this place what it is. I want to build you a guest cottage, 2 bedrooms, full bath, your own kitchen facing the bay. You'll live there as long as you want. That's not a problem, that's a privilege." My chest ached with something I hadn't felt in years. Respect, dignity, hope blooming fragile and fierce in the same breath. After he left, Horace grinned, flipping through his notes. "He's offering 15% over market value and covering all legal fees. He insists on drafting a clause ensuring your lifetime residence on the property." I stared out the window at the quiet bay, where early geese skimmed low across dusky water, tears prickling hot and insistent in my eyes. For so long, I'd accepted that old age meant shrinking, becoming invisible. that the world would simply sweep me aside to make room for its endless rush forward. But here was a man, a stranger, offering me space to stand tall again, to remain seen. I want him to have it, I whispered, my voice breaking with relief. Clara would have liked him. That night, lying in my narrow nursing home bed, I pulled Clara's wedding photo from my drawer and held it under the dim glow of the reading lamp. Her eyes twinkled in black and white lips, curved into that quiet smile that carried entire galaxies of love within it. I think it's time I fight back, darling, I whispered to her, pressing the photo to my heart. For us, for everything they tried to erase, and for the first time in months, I slept soundly, dreaming not of endings or loss, but of dawn sunlight warming the porch of my future guest house, and of Thornton's quiet promise echoing through my mind. It's not just a house I'm buying, Mr. Callahan. It's the stories within its walls, and I intend to honor every single one. 3 days later, everything was set. Thornton's lawyers finalized the purchase. The deed transferred quietly to his name while I sat at Pine Grove's dusty window, watching July rain streak the glass. For the first time in months, I felt warmth spread through my chest, not from sun, but from power. Quiet, righteous power. That morning, Horace called. Mr. Callahan Thornton wants to deliver the news himself. Today is good. I believe there's a family gathering at your old house. A family gathering? Of course. Vanessa's father's birthday. They would be there toasting in my living room, the same room where Clara once strung up paper lanterns for my retirement party, where we slow danced to Ella Fitzgerald while our children rolled their eyes in mock disgust. That room had belonged to love once. Today, it would witness justice. At precisely 2 p.m, Horace and Thornton picked me up from Pine Grove. Thornton wore an impeccable navy suit tailored to his lean frame, but his eyes were gentle as he offered his hand to help me into the car. Ready, Henry. More ready than I've ever been, I whispered. As we drove through Henlopen Acres, memories flickered by like streetlights at dusk. Clara on the porch reading Pride and Prejudice aloud. Henry Jr. racing his bicycle down the drive. Sophie learning to walk across the sunlit hardwood floor. For a moment, my vision blurred with grief, but I blinked it away. Today wasn't about what I'd lost. Today was about reclaiming what I still had, my dignity. When we arrived, cars lined the driveway. Inside, through the open curtains, I saw balloons, catered trays of shrimp cocktail, a chocolate cake adorned with gold lettering. Vanessa moved briskly between guests in a silk dress wine glass in hand, playing hostess in the home she'd stolen from under my feet. Thornton placed a hand on my shoulder. Follow my lead. We entered without knocking. Horace carried a leather briefcase, his face impassive. Conversations halted as we stepped inside. Ingram turned from the bar, his smile freezing mid-laugh. Dad, what are you doing here? Hello, son. My voice was calm, cold, stronger than it had been in years. Vanessa approached, eyes narrowed. This is Private Henry. You need to leave. Thornton cleared his throat. Actually, Mrs. Callahan, I'm here to introduce myself properly. I'm Thornton Barrington. As of this morning, I'm the new owner of this house. A hush fell across the guests. Somewhere, a fork clinked against a plate. Beat by beat, Ingram's face drained of color. What the hell is this? He whispered. It means, I said softly, savoring each word, that you have 30 days to vacate the premises. Vanessa's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. You can't do this. We live here. We have children. My parents. Your parents will need to find other arrangements, Thornton said evenly. Mr. Callahan has secured lifetime residency in the guest cottage I will build. You, however, are trespassing as of today. Ingram lunged forward, his face blotched red with rage. You manipulated him, he shouted at Horace. He's senile. This sale isn't legal. Independent doctors declared Mr. Callahan fully competent. Horace replied, coolly handing him a folder. All paperwork is here. Feel free to consult your lawyer. Guests shifted uncomfortably, pretending to check phones, staring into their wine. No one moved to defend my son. No one moved to defend Vanessa. Even Sophie, standing near the stairs in a pale blue dress, met my eyes with tears brimming. She mouthed, "Thank you." For the first time since Clara died, my spine straightened. I stood tall, taller than Ingram's threats, taller than Vanessa's scorn, taller than Pine Grove's rotting ceilings. This was my house, my victory, my life. Thornton placed his hand gently on my back. "Shall we?" "Henry," I nodded. As we stepped out into the cool bay breeze, leaving behind stunned silence, my heart beat with an old but familiar rhythm. Not fear, not resignation, freedom. 3 days after the final confrontation, Thornton handed me a small silver key attached to a lighthouse-shaped fob. His smile reached all the way to the quiet lines at the corners of his eyes. "Your temporary apartment?" he said, his voice warm and sure. "Until your guest house is ready." The apartment felt surreal, bright, airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing an endless Atlantic horizon. Waves curled and crashed in slow rolling rhythms that reminded me of Clara's laughter echoing across our kitchen back when the world still felt wide and simple. For the first time in years, I woke without dread pressing down on my chest. No Vanessa banging pots in my kitchen like weapons of war. No Ingram pacing the hallway with hushed phone calls to lawyers whispering about guardianship petitions and mental competency hearings. Just the sharp, clean scent of ocean salt drifting through a cracked window, the hush of gulls calling overhead, and the quiet knowledge that this small corner of the world was mine. Each morning, I brewed coffee exactly the way Clara loved, strong, dark, no sugar. I sat on the balcony wrapped in my old gray cardigan, feeling the sun warm my lined hands as gulls dipped and wheeled through winds that smelled of brine and promise. For breakfast, I sliced peaches onto oatmeal and let their sweetness soften the dark roast's bitter edge. I remembered her voice so vividly, it felt like breath against my ear. "It sweetens the bitterness, Henry." Now I savored that gentle bitterness like an old friend who had walked beside me all my life. Sophie visited every Saturday. She knocked softly, her hair pulled into a messy bun, college textbooks tucked under one arm. "Grandpa." She grinned, dropping her bag onto the entryway rug before wrapping her arms around my chest. "It smells like cinnamon in here. It smells like freedom," I teased, ruffling her hair until she squealed. We spent hours curled up on the Navy couch, her laptop balanced on her knees, as she showed me her finance assignments and spreadsheets full of equations that seemed like hieroglyphics to me. Sometimes we walked the promenade in long, meandering loops, the ocean breeze lifting strands of her hair as she talked about friends, professors, and dreams she was still learning to name. Once she looked up at me, her lashes clumped with unshed tears, her voice breaking like a young bird's first song. "I'm so sorry for what Dad and Vanessa did." I cupped her cheek with my palm, feeling her warmth radiate into my bones. "You owe me no apology, Sophie," I said softly. "You are my joy. Their choices are not yours to carry." When she left each evening, the silence felt different. No longer a cage of absence. Instead, a quiet room filled with possibility and peace. Thornton visited often, sometimes with blueprints rolled under his arm, unrolling them across my dining table with excitement, as he pointed to oak floors, wide glass windows, a wraparound porch that would cradle the dawn light each morning. Sometimes he came just to share dinner at the seafood grill down the block, his posture softening as the waitress teased him for ordering clam chowder again. One evening, as we sat overlooking the darkening sea, he told me about his late wife, his empire of hotels that felt emptier with each acquisition. "I built a kingdom," he whispered over crab bisque, his spoon shaking slightly in his grip, "and woke up one day with no one to share it with." I didn't tell him he'd already begun finding who to share it with. I simply reached across the tables and squeezed his wrist, nodding, understanding too deeply the hollow echo of success without companionship. Photography class became my second home. I bought a mirrorless camera with part of the proceeds from my house sale, joining sunrise shoots with retirees half my age and spirit. They welcomed me like an old oak joining their grove. One rainy afternoon, Eleanor Pringle, elegant in pearl earrings and a navy trench coat cinched tight against her waist, offered me a ride home. She was witty, fiercely intelligent, with a laugh that trilled like sparrows in spring. Soon, our coffees turned into dinners, our dinners into long walks along the marina docks as sodium lights flickered across the black water. "You make me feel seen again," she told me once, her voice trembling against the night breeze. "Not as a burden, as someone." I kissed her lightly on the temple, breathing in her lavender shampoo. "Because you are someone, Eleanor, someone extraordinary." As the weeks